Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to be here amongst all of our partners, because this is like the who's who of all of our partners. So it's great to have them all joining in, and some all the way from Lufkin and Fort Bend and everywhere else. So thank you so much. Thanks for hosting this, Maisha. I just want to go in by saying, since the video, actually, HPD has made victim services now its own division. It's no longer a unit. We're a division. We also have a commander. So it's grown from a little tiny unit attached to a chief's office that was, 6 people to a division. Commander Harlan Harris is our new commander. And he comes from the human trafficking side, so we're very lucky to have him. But I just wanted to add that. So we continue to grow with HPD, and the growth has just been exceptional. It's been a wild and fun ride. So thank you for acknowledging that, and we're very happy to be doing the work that we're doing in HPD.
Julie, can you describe to the audience a little bit about what DART is, how it came about, and what goals you hope it will accomplish?
Sure. So DART stands for the Domestic Abuse Response Team. It is a program that we launched in January of 2019. It provides essential victim services and links victims to emergency shelter, does an immediate on-scene needs assessment. So when that 911 call comes in, it will be essentially dispatched to a primary officer, a 2-man unit, 2 officers. They will go out and they will see if it's intimate partner, domestic violence. It can be strangulation, continued family violence, so many instances or just 2 instances, or strangulation. Any of those will prompt us, because as many people know that are on this call, that is the driver for domestic violence homicides. So we're trying to, the goal is to curb the rate of homicides in Harris County, Houston, Harris County, for domestic violence. So that enhances our engagement. It promotes citizen security, addresses violence against women, and it continues that short-term immediate needs response for domestic violence victims. We run from Wednesday through Monday. We run from Friday to Monday and Wednesdays from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. We've sent a proposal to be enhance those hours, but right now that's actually what we are. And HPD's victim services will then take that contact on scene to do that holistic kind of wraparound services, do a 24 to 48 hour follow-up from the DART on scene response, and make that follow-up call and make sure that we get the needs of that victim taken care of. We'll also make those referrals. If it's emergency housing or shelter, we have our nonprofit partners that we engage with, and they run the gamut from HAWK to Empowered Survivor, Montrose Center, the Bridge. They're everywhere. Of course, the council also helps us with any kind of transportation. I mean, that's the best thing about what we've been doing with HPD in the last 3 years, is forging those partnerships, and many new ones just this year. So those partners really help provide additional resources so victims can access those emergency short-term and long-term needs, counseling, AVDA's legal advocacy, access to health care, case management, and then on scene, after they have that victim advocate come on, we will get their permission to have a forensic nurse come on scene and talk to them about injuries if they want that forensic exam. And that's another piece of the puzzle that touches on that evidence and that burden for evidence being less on that victim and more on the system. So we can call that forensic nurse to court, and the DA's office can go more into this, but use them as an expert, non-hearsay, and let them talk about the interpersonal violence that they've experienced, which is going to obviously enhance the criminal investigations and offender accountability. And that's really what we're working for.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes.
And just drawing on, you've got over 24 years of experience in law enforcement. You've seen a lot of things in 24 years, I'm sure. And you have a history of working scenes as a patrol officer. Mm-hmm. So from that experience and knowledge, what do you see as different about DART? What excites you or propels you to say this is different or this is something that can help?
The victim's reaction, the survivor's reaction after. Like, I never would have thought you would all be here to help me. I had no idea this was here. Had I known this, I wouldn't have been in this situation as long as I have. Where have y'all been? Just the sheer satisfaction that I know that 5 years ago, 3 years ago, in parts of the city, they wouldn't been able to get the services that they're getting now because they just didn't exist. We hadn't forged those partnerships. And I'm telling you, the partnerships and with our nonprofits, that's critical, because law enforcement will never be able to tow the rope alone, never. But with our nonprofit partners, legal, counseling, everything, and the high risk team that, we'll get to talk to Alicia and Nuzzie later, but being able to turn certain cases over to have that expertise jump on that case and give it the resources that it needs to be able to get whomever assistance immediately, that's something we never had before. And the video says it. The video shows it. The end results, you can't put into words what those survivors are saying, and that's it.
And I think what you're describing is how providing this immediate response from an advocacy perspective really begins the chain of building trust with a law enforcement organization, where trust is really difficult and challenging and really not there for many people. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, we have a large immigrant community. By culture, by nature, a lot of our domestic violence victims don't trust law enforcement because it's what they've been told for their entire life. Don't trust law enforcement, whether it was in the country they came from and now it's just here too. And no matter what, if you call them, the first thing we're going to do is deport you and take your children away. There's a huge mistrust there. But the other is historical. It goes back for decades and decades. And so in realizing that, from the very first touch, when DART goes out on that scene, the officer's stepping away, and you have a victim advocate that's stepping in, and they're saying, you might be scared of them, but I work with them and I can bridge the gap. You can talk to me. I'll give them the information and I promise they'll help you. They're not, they bridge that gap for trust. So that's unique and different. It's a lot like our CERT unit, right? That's our mental health side, where they go out and they are doing that trust and trauma also. Because so many people don't trust law enforcement, that will go straight for weapons instead of talking that victim down, de-escalating. Same thing in any crisis situation, but for domestic violence victims, they've been told and told and told, don't trust the police. The first thing they're going to do is this, this, and this. So for various different reasons, we have to keep all that in mind. But from first touch, when DART's called to the scene, that's when we start building that rapport and that trust. And it's with that victim advocate that really makes the difference, because they're the ones that can engage. They're in plain clothes and they want to talk to someone, but they're very reserved when it comes to someone in uniform.
Thank you, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to open it to the audience to ask you a few questions if you're open to that. And then we're going to move to a panel discussion and just build on what we're discussing from several disciplines. But my last question for you is, what do you find most rewarding in this space?
You already know the answer to
I
that.
do. I do.
Okay, so and I think I said it on the video. It is really, I'll tell you that they had an engagement where they brought a bunch of our DART survivors together for a Christmas Santa gift giveaway, and I got to see those victims from their housing and locations. They had come to one central location at a hotel foyer, and I saw the kids and I saw all the reward of the work. And for me, I get to see that, but it's also what I need to bring back to those night shift officers, that I need to remember to bring back to the advocates, that I need to remember to share with, all of the officers. They're doing the work, and all they ever see is the crisis and the emergency and the need. They don't get to see the reward. So that video with the mom saying, my daughters are good. They're good now. And that's the benefit to me, because if we just have one family, then it's all worth it. One family that isn't understanding that domestic violence isn't just black and blue. It's financial. It's all these other things. To me, that's everything. And I think all of us probably on this call are not doing what we do to get rich. We're doing it because we're passionate. We love the work. We love helping people, and it's what drives us and motivates us. But seeing the result is my thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julie. And I love how you talked about carrying that message to others who don't get to see that. Such an important part of the big picture, right? Like, we all have to think about where we can spread information and share information. We focus so much on the negative. And if we focused as much on the positive, what might we be able to change in this world, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So before we have about 3 or 4 minutes before we move to the panel where we're going to broaden this discussion. And I just want to thank you, Julie, for being with us here today and sharing this new innovative approach from the Houston Police Department and your leadership in that effort. And I'm wondering if there are any questions, and you can type them in the chat or use your raise the hand feature. And Marie, Nicole, I'm going to ask a couple of you to help me moderate if you see anything.
I know I didn't do that good. There's gotta be some questions out there.
Maybe we just have a quiet group this morning.
I think they'll start asking questions after the rest of our team starts engaging.
All right. Well, so let's move.
A question.
Yeah, jump in.
Okay. This is Christine from the DRO.
Okay.
You spoke a lot about what happens on the scene. Do you also take referrals for individuals who are experiencing domestic violence, or I know those are new term for it, partner violence or something like that, and help those individuals who may not have had, an incident right then and there, but they are having issues, those types of concerns in the home?
We always take referrals, and we will always do follow-ups. If they are not ready to report, but they want resources and they want to talk to a victim advocate, of course. We do that a lot. Sometimes we'll do that if we get a follow-up from a patrol officer who says, hey, I think something's going on, but they didn't want to report anything. But I think if an advocate and officer go by there to try and just talk to the victim, maybe you can give some resources. We'll do whatever whatever we need to during that 7 to 3. When we have DART rolling, we do follow-ups. We do follow-ups for previous days. We'll do a follow-up on a recommendation, like you said. Now, the one thing we have to be careful of is if that suspected abuser is home, when is the safe time for the victim to go? So we would always want to ask and get information to make sure that we're not doing anything that would jeopardize the safety of that victim / survivor that you may be referring. So we would definitely I would want to get a little more information just in case anything is going on. We don't want to cause any issues for that victim / survivor.
Julie, I see another question in the chat. Have you thought about having a counselor go out and do relationship counseling?
Actually, when we have those types of instances where we just know, because you've done the work for so long, that survivor is pretty adamant they're not going to leave, we do referrals to AVDA for their counseling, for anger management, for our suspects, our survivors, and then couples counseling is certainly something we want to recommend for sure, and we do that. So yes, we don't necessarily, they don't go out with us, because typically when we respond to a call with DART, it's an on-scene crisis response. We're trying to bring them out of crisis and just de-escalate it. And that long-term counseling, that is what our partners are for. That is what we do all of our referrals for, because I have just those crisis response advocates.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie.
Yes, ma'am.
Any last question for Julie? And again, we'll have more time for questions and answers at the end. So again, Julie, thank you for sharing such an innovative program and setting the stage and talking about supporting victims and building trust and engaging communities. You covered the whole gamut of this year's theme for Victims' Rights Week. And now we're going to bring in a few other folks to share that theme with us. Maisha Colter, who you've met, is the CEO of AVDA. And Maisha, I'm going to introduce you all one at a time and ask you to share just a little bit about what your agency is doing in the space to work with victims or offenders. So we'll start with you, Maisha.
Sure. So AVDA has been around now for about 40 years, and we do take a holistic approach to helping not only survivors, but those who've been identified as the perpetrators of the abuse in their intimate partner relationships. The way that we do that as an organization is that we provide the free legal representation to those who are victims. We are primarily focused on civil matters, and those are exclusively addressed in the family courts. We represent victims at no cost to them, giving them assistance with getting a protective order, divorce, custody, child support, modification. In some instances where there has been a fatality as a result of domestic abuse, we will help a left behind family member, neighbor even, to adopt a child or children who have been victimized in that way. We have, under the umbrella of our legal advocacy program, trauma counselors who work with individual survivors. They do individual counseling with them, as well as they do support groups. We also have a referral partner or contract with CPS, where we provide a support group or a process group around the issue of domestic abuse for those who have been involved with that system. Sometimes they keep their children, sometimes they have their children removed, but we're working with them on how to identify their issues related to the abuse and repair that home situation so that they can secure their children back at a minimum. In addition to the legal advocacy and trauma services, we have the battering intervention and prevention program, and that is an 18-week psychoeducation program dedicated to hopefully providing tools to those who've been identified as perpetrators of domestic abuse. Most of, about 95% of the people who are referred to our BIP program are referred as a result of being adjudicated in a family violence crime. So whether that be a misdemeanor assault all the way up to a felony, those individuals, as a term and condition of maybe probation or parole, will be required to attend BIP for a minimum of 18 weeks. It is a state accredited BIP program. We have right now about 18 groups. We are the largest BIP provider in the state of Texas. And we, pre-COVID, required all of our participants to be present with their group facilitator at various locations. We used to have about 11. We are now providing BIP on a virtual platform, and I anticipate at some point we will go back to a face-to-face meeting format, largely because that was a part of what was required from the state, that there be that face-to-face interaction. It's just a level of accountability that they thought was best practice. And unfortunately, given the danger and risk around COVID for both the participants and the facilitators, we've resolved to meet in the virtual format for now. In addition to the two program services that I just described, we also have a committed team of awareness and prevention practitioners. So we have our CAPS teams, the Community Awareness Prevention Program, and they do outreach to elevate the community and the issue of domestic abuse, to elevate the issue of domestic abuse in the community. They educate the community about what domestic abuse is, how it impacts not only the individuals who are involved in the relationships, but us as a larger society. In addition to that, they work on the prevention side of things. They work with a large number of schools doing prevention curriculum in those schools. Of course, COVID again impacted the way we do business and services related to that. Some of that went virtual and some of it went away. We had to pivot and focus our attention in other spaces, and we've done that. Again, my hope is that when we sort of normalize and go back to business, once people are vaccinated and things start to give us an opportunity to get into a face-to-face space, we'll resume work in the schools. We educate law enforcement, we educate courts, first responders, just various people who will have contact with either a victim or a survivor or family in crisis around this issue, that they understand that there are resources and places that they can go to find relief and to find assistance. I think I described everything, but I may have missed something, so feel free to ask questions.
Thanks, Maisha. We also have with us today Alicia Nuzzie, who is the high-risk team coordinator, the project director at the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. Alicia, can you share with us a little bit about what high-risk team means?
Good morning, everybody, and my apologies for coming to you faceless. As we have come to realize now with all of us working remotely that technology is a blessing and a curse. And for me, it was my computer this morning who did not want to cooperate. So there we have it. But we've forged on, right? Like we always do, and especially have we seen this past year. And so I want to thank AVDA for asking me to be a part of this panel and this important discussion. And thank you, Barbie. So the Domestic Violence High Risk Team is somewhat of a new initiative that is being piloted throughout the state of Texas. Money was awarded to the Texas Council on Family Violence, I believe, during the legislative session in 2017 to possibly look at the success of this model. The idea of this team actually originated up north in Massachusetts from the Jeannie Geiger Crisis Center. It's a domestic violence provider up there. And tragically, the reason why they came up with this model is, something that all of us as advocates kind of fear the most is that they had a client gunned down in front of family as they were she was trying to leave an abusive situation. But what they realized is as they were going through and talking to community partners is that every community partner had done everything right. And so that just it's kind of where the idea was born as well. What would have happened if we all were in the same room together, talking to each other about and sharing information? Would there have been different suggestions made at different points? And could we have all collaborated a little better to see if we could increase the safety? And could there have been a different outcome? That hypothesis, so to speak, was what they decided to kind of take a look at. And they were quite successful in that. They found quite a bit of success of coming together. And now they are a technical assistance provider. They help teams all across the nation develop these, they help to develop these teams. So it's really fantastic in the fact that, it's based on 4 fundamental principles. It's early identification of a high-risk case through risk assessment tools. It's using a multidisciplinary team, enhancing victim services, and holding perpetrators accountable. That's basically it, right? Sounds super easy. Well, in like a county such as big as Harris County, that's a little challenging. We've got lots of different people who do amazing work in this county. And so, so it's important that, while it seems, super easy, as we were trying to lift off here in Harris County, what we found was it is kind of quite challenging to bring folks together. But we have been successful. Harris County itself does have 2 teams operating right now. We have a larger team, and AVDA is a partner of that, and HPD is a partner of that. And we have a smaller team that operates out in Pasadena. Our larger team consists of partners such as the Houston Police Department, Harris County Sheriff's Office, Harris County Community Supervision and Corrections, which we think of as probation. We obviously have the Harris County Domestic Violence Division from the DA's office. We have AVDA. We have, of course, the Coordinating Council, Texas Attorney General's Office, Crime Victims Compensation Division, Fugitive Task Force, and that's based out of the District Attorney's Office. We actually have a FED, we always say, the United States Attorney's Office. We do have a federal prosecutor who sits at the table. And then we have other DV providers, such as the Houston Area Women's Center and other DV providers. And what we do is we meet monthly, and we have these high-risk cases that are referred over to us. And what we do with the, obviously with survivors' permission, is that we all work together to make sure that we're providing those services and that we're holding the offender accountable. And there's really something magical that tends to happen when we're in these meetings, because oftentimes what we find is that we get to learn about one another. We get to learn more about that agency. How many times do we make that referral over to an agency and we think we know what they do, but we don't really know what they do. We don't know really how it all happens. So having these designated point people in these agencies is really fantastic, because when we pose these questions like, well, would you be able to revoke his probation? Well, here's what I would need in order to do that. It's like, it's a good quality conversation. So we're looking at actual, finding some action items, discussing those action items, and getting it done. And then, being able to share that information with one another, so that we can make sure that we're all in agreement about steps that we're taking, is really fantastic. And then also for our survivors, what we're hearing is just knowing that they have a team of people behind them that are working with them has been really powerful for them. So bringing these folks together and talking about these issues, has really developed this trust among one another as well. It's like we say all the time during our team meetings, you better leave your ego at the door. Because if you don't think that there's something that you could be looking at to change your ways internally with your agency, or even the way that you're doing things, think again, right? We all can learn from one another about things, and that's how we should be doing it. And that's where we put our survivor. This needs to be survivor led, because those cases that are coming to us are most at risk for homicide. And if we don't talk to each other, and if we don't really listen to what each other can do, then this is useless. There's no point in recognizing high-risk cases if we're not able to provide the service and the safety that are needed for that.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Now we're going to turn to Mr. Chad Bridges, who is with the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office. And Chad, tell us a little bit about what it is that your work involves.
So again, my name is Chad Bridges. I'm with the Fort Bend County DA's office. I'm chief of the Family Violence Division. I first came to Fort Bend County in 2003 after having started at Harris County in FCLD back in the last millennium, and after having started a family violence prosecution unit at the Waller County DA's office. We have a great advantage over Harris County in this sense that we're still small. I mean, relatively. We still have a very small town feel to what we do. And so we all have the ability, because of our scale, to interact with each other frequently. And we do that through our coordinating council, which is the Fort Bend County Crime Victims Response Team. And we see our partners and talk to them, not just at the meetings each month, but there's interactions between our office and our friends at AVDA in Fort Bend and at the Fort Bend County Women's Center and all these other partner agencies on a daily basis. And it still has that small town feel to it. And that is beneficial. It helps us organize our limited resources much better, I think. I think it's a tremendous advantage. And we also have daily contact at that level with our law enforcement agencies. Aren't so big that you can't pick up a phone and not only get to a detective or to a sergeant, but a lieutenant quickly and easily and resolve issues before they become problems. One of the things that we've done is we've also started a domestic violence high-risk team, and I'm really proud of what we've done. It's not my doing. It's Lita Zavala, who's on this program, who's in the crowd, and I'm not going to call her out at the moment. But ours is a little bit different from Alicia's, and it's just kind of the nature of Fort Bend. Ours has rolled out during a pandemic, which is not the best circumstances to do that. But ours focuses on a lot of the same things about coordinated care, and we've used it as a way to get back to better practices that we let pass by as we grew bigger. One of the things that we do with our DVHRT is we use lethality assessments, and at the end of one of those, we have, if someone is high risk, we have them reach out to a domestic violence service provider. In the north end of the county, it's our friends at Katy Christian Ministries. For the rest of the county, it's our friends at Fort Bend Women's Center. We used to, back at the turn of this millennium, we would have, for many of our cases, an advocate from the Women's Center come out to scenes. We can't do that at 850,000 people, but we're getting back to doing it now. We have two other very important things that we do with this that help our interactions with survivors. One is when we do these lethality assessments, it is a piece of information that before just remained in offense reports, but now that we have these sheets that we're using, we're actually using them to get this information, these lethality factors, in front of magistrates. Without getting into a much bigger problem, we want to make sure that there are appropriate bond conditions and appropriate bond amounts set for people accused of interpersonal violence. And although what we do is we have probable cause hearings and statements just like in Harris County, when you state probable cause, it doesn't tell you enough about the risk situation that your victim is in. And by adding this extra information, we're putting it on the magistrates to make sure that they know and they're apprised of who needs a little bit extra. We're doing that, and I think we're starting to see some fruits of that. The other thing that we're doing is kind of similar, but not the same as the DART that Lieutenant Pleasant discussed. We've entered into an agreement with Texas Forensic Nurse Examiners to get forensic examinations in all of our strangulation cases. We have struggled, the whole state has struggled with trying to get police officers to become medical experts. And you can bring in the best trainers. We've brought in Kelsey McKay to talk about this and train our law enforcement officers, but I can't afford to bring her in on every case and have her testify on every case. So what we're doing instead is we're having our folks with Dr. Breeden talk to these people, get the information, and have the trained nurses explain why this is petechiae, which also gets us out of a lot of Crawford and hearsay issues because these statements are made in the course of medical diagnosis and treatment.
Thank you so much, Chad. I think you all are in the presence of some extreme wisdom and expertise here, and I want to invite you to use the chat to ask any questions, and we have Nicole and Marie who are going to help monitor that. And while you're thinking about questions, I'm going to formulate a few for our panel to kick us off. I want to start by just reflecting back to the video, the beautiful video that AVDA presented. Congrats to you. That is such a great tool and really exemplify the importance of the work that we can do, and you know, honors the space that we're in when we're working with survivors and victims. And so I'm going to ask this first question of Maisha, but it's also open to each of you. Maisha, can you talk about building on this theme of supporting victims? Can you talk about why that's so important?
Yeah, I think the theme is not only obviously timely and relevant to what's happening in the larger society, and I'll remind everyone that the theme this year is support victims, build trust, engage communities. But it is also sort of what has ailed us as a group in terms of domestic violence movement, is that we have a lot of people that we serve who are unfortunately marginalized, underserved, and they don't necessarily have a culturally trained response when they have a need around domestic abuse. And so it's hard to build that trust and to engage in a way that's going to be meaningful for them ultimately, so that they can break free from these ties that bind them as a victim of domestic abuse. What I think everyone on the call, it's clear we're all motivated to help, but if we put ourselves in a collective space, in a collaborative space, I think we can do much more than what we do as individual service providers. And so that was the intention around the messaging in the video that we provided, is that we want people to know that collaboration will be much more fruitful and give these people who we need to serve and want to serve a lot more assistance that is ally rich, and we can all sort of rely on our particular strengths. And I think that's the way that we solve for some of the things that, again, are pain points around trying to help and serve victims of domestic abuse. We know that domestic abuse exists in a space of fear, in a space of shame. And so overcoming just those embedded obstacles is already difficult. And if a person has the ability to go past their own fear and go past their own shame to seek services, we need to be equipped as providers to help that individual. And we need to be able to recognize when we are not necessarily the right provider for the need that that person presents. And that means we need to get to know each other, and we need to be able to communicate with each other as effectively as possible. I like what Chad said just now, which is sort of going back to some of the things that we know work. And I think that level of assessment from the space that we all occupy as providers is really important. What are we doing that's right? What have we done in the past that we need to carry into the future? And what do we need to get rid of? So those are the types of things that we should be examining and contemplating as providers in this space. And we just want to encourage one another on this call, but overall, to reach out to each other and learn about what we all do and see where we have strengths in this space that we can rely on and again, commit to the overarching goal, which is to serve our community, specifically those that are vulnerable as a result of domestic and intimate partner violence.
Maisha, thank you for that charge. I think it's so important, right? Like reaching out and connecting and communicating. We can never over communicate. I just want folks to hear that. We're all adults, and adult learners have to hear something 5 to 7 times. So we can never over communicate. And I think, we're in a space also where, again, we're engaging with marginalized communities, and communities of color is even more challenging. But we also have this conundrum that exists that less than 10% of victims will ever reach out for help. We know that. That research tells us. So when they do reach out for help, we have this beautiful, network of organizations and systems. We also have folks that might only reach out to one kind of intervention. And they think this next question is going to be for Julie and for Chad. Often you're going to engage with victims who have never reached out to a service provider before. And a law enforcement touch is the first touch that they have, Julie. What are your thoughts about that in terms of building trust and supporting victims?
That's exactly why DART's so crucial, and we launched DART citywide in August of 2020, but that first touch is paramount, because if that victim or survivor has children, that's the first time they're going to see mom interface with law enforcement. That's the first time they're going to see us interface with, maybe it's dad or boyfriend or whomever, brother. It doesn't matter. So that's all very crucial in the role that we play, and that's part of that trauma-informed, victim-centered training that law enforcement gets. Actually, we're getting that this year in our mandatory training as part of our mandatory training, and every year we get some facet or framework of that. But it's crucial because it tells them, hey, if I'm the one to blame, then I'm not doing that again. This isn't what I want. I never want this again. So if this is the end result of me calling the police, is they're going to tell me, well, what did you do? Why did you do it that way? It's not. It's all in how you present it. It's all in the communication. It's all in your body language, and that's the kind of things that having a more informed, trauma-informed police agency is all that much better for your community engagement, your relational policing, and it's part of, like Maisha said, that holistic approach to dealing with victims of trauma. And that's any violent crime. That's a homicide survivor who just saw someone murdered. That's a robbery victim who, had a pistol to their head, and that's all very traumatic. It's all we engage in is victim of traumatic events. So knowing that as a police officer, we know we have to go at a different angle, but it doesn't matter for us because they see a uniform. So having the advocate there for those at the first initial interface is somehow it opens them up to be a little less guarded, I should say, a little less guarded and a little more open to dealing with law enforcement, maybe for the first time.
Thank you, Julie.
Julie, I have a question. This is Brenda Kiger-Skagel. I'm one of the BIP facilitators at AVDA. Has the police department, I know we have like a hotline for abuse, but has the police department thought about maybe a relationship counseling line where they can, when they're having an argument, and it's escalating, maybe a number they can call to have somebody talk them through how they should handle the conflict, how to communicate, how to de-escalate the situation, take a time out. I think if we're more proactive, that's going to help, obviously decrease the numbers of domestic violence. We need to give them the skills that they need.
Yeah, Brenda, I think that's a great idea. I know, we have the Houston area women's hotline, we have the national hotline, but, I never thought about law enforcement hotline for how to intercede and how to interject and how to handle those ongoing confrontations. That's a great idea. I have never thought of that.
So let me share with you that one of the things that did launch with some COVID relief dollars, and the city of Houston launched a hotline with the Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization. Yes. And they did some PSAs that were aimed at just what you're describing, Brenda. I don't think that hotline has stopped. I think they're still taking calls. I just don't think folks know about it. So, and I can I can try to look that number up and get that for you, but I don't know that I can do that at the same time I'm moderating here, but we can certainly get that out for folks.
Yeah, because I think that would help a lot if our clients, well, not even our clients, hopefully, it's the ones that other 90%, that don't call for help, because all of us, that are married. I've been married 27 years, so I'm still constantly working on my conflict resolution skills, how to communicate properly, how to fight fairly. But a lot of us, unfortunately, we didn't have ideal role models growing up. So, we learn from our childhood, usually our role models. So if we could, and I know Maria's doing a great job getting into the schools, trying to educate the younger population. But I think if we had a safe space where couples could call, realizing, okay, they're not going to be arrested, but that they're actually going to, they want to make their marriage work. They don't, because obviously whenever we raise our voice or if there's physical or any kind of domestic abuse, I mean, that makes us feel horrible. So if we could teach, just have a resource for them where they could, a safe resource where they could call and hopefully, somebody talk to them on the phone, or maybe they go out there and they sit down and do like relationship counseling, or even make, when the police go out, if it gets to that point, make that mandatory that they have to get some relationship counseling, so they can both recognize what the red flags are. Maybe they're not aware there's red flags, and the resources that ADVA and other nonprofits offer, give them those, those resources and let them know, hey, these are the red flags. If it gets to this point, you need to really maybe seek help, reevaluate your relationship because it's not healthy. But maybe on the flip side, maybe we can help them, to have a healthy relationship, how to communicate, how to fight fairly, how to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah. I think we can see that there's definitely several complexities when we start dealing with the broader picture. And I know there's a couple of questions in the chat, but I want to turn to Chad for just a moment. And Chad, can you talk about, from a criminal justice perspective and a district attorney's office, you all are prosecuting these crimes. Many times you have survivors who don't trust that the system, one, is going to work quickly, and two, give me any outcome that's going to keep me safe, and three, I just don't even understand what this process is all about. So can you talk about that just a little bit in terms of supporting victims and building trust?
Yes. Before I do, I want to touch on a couple of earlier points that were brought up. One is, one of the beautiful things I think that's come out of our DVHRT is training that helps build some, trust with our communities. Fort Bend County, very diverse. And every day, yesterday, I had a conversation with the prosecutor who said, we need an outreach to this specific community, which is a subgroup of our Indian community. It gets that specific. But the DVHRT training was such that we went out and did roll call training, and they've instituted an FTO training, but it reorientates. It's just the paradigm for our officers to go in there and do this lethality assessment, and it makes them think about the danger that this victim might be in, and it makes them take affirmative steps to try to help that victim if they're a high risk. And there is a victim they're seeing that this is a person delivering services to them through Katy Christian Ministries or the Fort Bend Women's Center, who is there to get their situation safer. And I think that's a tremendous improvement. Not that our officers were not trauma informed and that they didn't care, but there's nothing like doing something right then to help create trust. One of the things, to move to your immediate question, one of the things I talked to folks about, and Abir's watched me do it with the Fort Bend Women's Center for years, is set expectations. That this is not going to be a sprint. This is a marathon, that this is not going to be like what you see on TV. And I try to train my prosecutors that when they deal with victims, that they can be firm, but they can be understanding, and they can be evidence-based and still empathetic in what's going on. And we've for years been a very evidence-based oriented group of how we prosecute cases. And when you do it that way and your function is solely on safety, it makes the communications a lot easier. when it's based on, we're doing this not because we're necessarily trying to punish your boyfriend, or we're not trying to break up your family. We're doing this from the perspective of, this is our dead level best idea of what's going to keep you safe, and whoever he may move into another relationship later safe. I think it helps them understand better, and I think it leads to better outcomes.
Thank you so much, Chad. Alicia, we heard from Maisha the importance of really reaching outside yourself, not being able to do this alone. It's all organizations looking at this together and being willing to assess what's happening, what's working well, what's not working well. And you talked about, you know, the high-risk team checking their egos at the door. Can you expand on that just a little bit and talk about how, when organizations and people within those organizations check their egos at the door, it supports victims?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, sometimes what I have shown in being in this space, I'm so lucky and privileged to be able to work with these amazing individuals. You know, having point people in all these agencies are just so important, especially to what Chad was saying. You know, when you have a crisis situation that comes before you, knowing exactly where to go get information that produce immediate results builds that trust. You know, it's like, and then allows for, you know, for the survivor to possibly open up even more. So, you know, I think, you know, sometimes what this has shown, this project has shown me especially, is just how often we operate in silos. You know, we see our work and we have things that we're supposed to do, whether that be through policy or procedure or whatever. It almost feels sometimes like we're going through a checklist, right? And then, you know, because maybe we had a survivor who went to this one agency and didn't get the results that we that anybody expected, then we might have an idea about that, and we do it better, and so, you know, when we come to this work with those thoughts and mindsets, then, you know, it's the blame game. And so whenever we talk about our cases, and if there has been something that comes up, you know, we always want to try and reassure our partners is that this is not about blame. It's not about blame. This is about us really making sure that we're talking to one another for a survivor, you know? So I just feel like sometimes we're just inundated. Obviously, everyone is inundated with cases, right? And we just get sometimes into that routine, and this is what I got to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And then, you know, and then it just gets very territorial, and it gets very specific. And I just feel like when we do encounter those cases, like, you know, Chad was saying, when we have these risk assessment tools now, and we're able to screen these cases, and we know that these are high numbers that are coming through, we now have a weighted, evaluated tool that we're using, and it's verifying these feelings that we're having, right, for the most part. And so, you know, we know that this is a high risk case. We know it's a risk, you know, a case at risk for homicide. So, you know, it's important that we're sharing this information, that we're being mindful of this as we encounter other agencies and we talk to other agencies and advocates, you know, that we're all sharing this information so that we can continue to make sure that the survivor is at the core of it all, and that we are not preventing the work that we do doesn't interfere with what the survivor needs. And, you know, the other thing that I may say, because I just very quickly, is, you know, one of the other amazing things about coming together, obviously it's about the survivor on this macro level or micro level, right? It's a homicide prevention model. It's a, you know, it's a project that is aimed to reduce homicides and near lethal assaults. But the other beautiful thing that it can do is also really show you the gaps that are existing in systems, right? And then it really helps everyone focus in on what those gaps are, and we have, and then focusing our advocacy efforts on how we might be able to change that on a bigger level, on a macro level that will help all survivors. And so that's also one of the great things about bringing everybody together and being very frank about what you can do and what you can't do. And I think this past year with COVID, we definitely saw that there were so many changes that were happening due to courts being shut down and just people getting sick, and, you know, and shelters being full. I mean, we couldn't go after the same safety measures that we were doing before. We had to rethink every way that we were dealing with these cases. And so, so again, going back to your original question about ego, I mean, especially this past year when we were looking at how COVID was affecting our community, it's like, don't give me your spiel about what your agency is supposed to do. Tell me for real what you can do right now, so that we can really make sure that we're plugging people into services that they need right now.
Excellent point. I think, as systems and organizations and agencies that are serving, there are limits. We are struggling with I think we used a picture in one presentation of someone trying to drink from a fire hose, right? And that existed prior COVID, right? That's not a new phenomenon. And COVID just exacerbated that. And, I think we're getting really creative in how we're addressing the need, but we're also, and Chad, you put it beautifully, managing expectations, right? Being realistic, being honest. This is what we can and can't do. And then how do we start thinking about and you also use these words and I love it, what does safer mean? And where does that definition, we all have this ability to help folks think about, they are the experts in their own lives. And if we can create space that talks about how do we help you get safer right now, it can only be more helpful. Again,
Barbie, there's a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if we have time to get to all of them.
Agreed.
I'm watching the clock. It's 11:11. We want to make sure we don't go past our time, but I would like to give the attention to those in the audience who had questions that we might be able to respond to quickly.
Excellent.
Do we want to read those out, Marie? Can you, or is someone monitoring? I just saw things popping up.
I can start one, Marie. I'm sorry, Maisha. One was, hi everyone, I am Monica Mars, founder, president of Women's Substance Nonprofit Organization, and I am based in Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean. Oregon supports persons affected by domestic violence and abuse. How can we connect with your agency for possible collaboration and training?
So we're happy to connect offline. Our number is 713-224-9911. And because we are pretty aware of all of our community partners that are on this call, if we're not the right organization to help you, we can, we have the list of everybody who's registered for this forum this morning. So feel free to call us at AVDA and we can make that connection. And certainly we are willing to help with training. And hello from Tobago.
And did we cover what is the HPD protocol response to victims dealing with severe and continuous stalking and/or threats?
I tried to answer some in the chat, so
yeah.
If I didn't fully answer this, then by all means, just let me know. But I said, that person, our survivor victim, needs to document every single instance, every time, every location. They need to have documentation of that. If it's screenshots, if it's threats, we need screenshots. So we can document that. And then what we will do is, if maybe they're not ready to outcry to law enforcement, but when they are, they will have that documentation ready. When they decide that they're ready to come to us, or even through our nonprofit partners, we have an officer go out and get that report. We then turn it over to the DA's office and ask for a charge. It's hard to prove because you have to have a pattern. And Chad, please feel free to jump in here. But that's why we ask to be very vigilant about the times and the dates and the locations of the stalking and where that survivor is at, so that when and if we do get approval for that protective order, then we know the pattern of where that person is going to be and what locations we have to put on there for that victim.
She's exactly right. I mean, for those cases, documentation is everything. On top of that, what we tell our officers, what the message we're supposed to be communicating to our officers when it comes to protective orders is, one, when it comes to emergency protective orders, even if the victim is unsure, but you think it's necessary, it's much better to request one and then have it dropped than not to request one at all and regret the hell out of it later. And two is when it comes to these things, our office, we do screening here, and we will ask law enforcement for the documentation from them, regardless of whether we're going to file charges or not. And we can plug it into the various types of Article 7A or 7B, whichever way the legislature has it right now, protective orders, or the Chapter 85 protective orders, and go from there regardless of what the criminal charges might or might not be. And we have that often where we pursue protective orders that we think we can win, but we couldn't prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt. But it's the key to it's all documentation.
And I would say that AVDA does the same thing with the 7A stalking protective orders. Is we rely on the victim to be able to give us as much information to support the evidence that we would have to present to the court in regard to that type of protective order. And just for the audience, there are multiple types of protective orders. We tend to think about the family violence 85 protective order, but there are some criminal protective orders that are also available, sexual assault, stalking, things of that nature, to kind of make you guys aware that that is also an option depending on the facts and circumstances surrounding the particular individual situation.
I don't want to prolong this going into this conversation. I'm Myra Mendez. I'm one of the trauma counselors at AVDA. And I guess this question stems, and this is what I'm most curious about. Is there a certain amount of evidence that they need before an officer will take a report? Because, you know, my experience has been that the officer will come and there isn't enough, and then a report isn't done. And so, you know, being able to manage a client's expectations or to continue to encourage them to collect the evidence and then make the report so that they'll be heard is in the next step that I'm trying to do to say, yes, you know, let's keep doing this. Let's keep working on this so that you will finally, you know, be believed is basically what we're getting to. And so I'm just wondering, like, what do the officers really take into account? How much would you need at that point just to be able to, you know, again, properly manage, you know, our clients' expectations?
So I think I'm going to answer that by saying every situation is going to be different. If in that stalking, there's also a threat, or there's also this, or that's going to be different for every situation, right? But I can say that anytime you feel that you need a report, incident report on a matter, and there's a known suspect, you can't just call the 1-800 number or, you know, our non-emergency line and do a report. That officer has to come out to your location. So a lot of times on things like that, I always tell my survivor victim to go to the location, go to the nearest storefront and get it knocked out, because it doesn't take very long to do that. But if you call and you have to have a unit come to you, it's going to be a long time, because it's not a priority one call. So every priority one call, which is a robbery in progress or an assault in progress, it's all going to pile on top of that one call. So if it's an informational report like that, always just, I recommend go to the local law enforcement closest office and get that officer at the front desk to knock that out, and you get your information report. And that would be my recommendation.
So Maisha, there was a question about, can you talk a little bit more about what is needed to get a protective order?
So the basic protective order requirements from an evidentiary standpoint is we've got to show that the domestic violence happened and it is likely to continue without that court intervention. And so one of the things that we need to know is what happened. So we want the history of incidences that have occurred that can be considered domestic violence. And then we want to know what are the types of behavior that demonstrate that this is going to continue. And that could be anything from, you know, this person is calling me, you know, constantly, they're showing up to my work. It will depend on the particular facts and circumstances of each individual. But the most important thing that an individual who thinks a protective order is needed should consider is telling their story to someone who could help them assess the situation and make some advice and counsel to them as a practitioner, as an attorney, as a district attorney who goes into these courts and has the knowledge about the audience, which is the judge who's going to consider their particular situation. But it's important to tell exactly what's happening. Sometimes when we have clients in front of us, they may not know what is important to tell. And so having that professional interaction with an advocate or a lawyer or paralegal or whoever's talking to them to get them to start to massage what is going on in a way that is, again, meaningful for identifying that there was domestic abuse and demonstrating to the court that without this intervention, this is likely to continue and pose a danger and a risk to this person. So that's what we would do as the advocate who's engaged in that survivor, is to think about their situation and the facts that will help them to accumulate evidence to talk to a judge and get them the protective order that they need. That's what we do.
Thanks, Maisha. I think we're on the let's wind down. This has gone so quickly. There's so many more questions I wanted to ask. I want to thank you all for asking questions in the chat. I'm going to encourage those of you who are with organizations that have resources or information to share, please drop it in the chat. Drop in hotline numbers or contact information so that we can gather that information, and I'm sure that can be sent out to the participants. You're also going to be asked to there you go, there's going to be a link for a survey that we're going to ask you to complete. Please complete the link on the screen or through an email that will be sent to you. I want to ask each of our panelists to just give us a closing word. You know, what brings you hope in this space? And I'm going to start with Chad.
Hope is that people are all focused here today to do what's right. And I want to share with all y'all this, and the people from Fort Bend County, I've told you this a million times, so you can stop listening right now for a moment. But you can't pour from an empty vessel. Take care of yourselves so that you can take care of others. That's all that I have on that.
Beautiful, Chad. Thank you. Julie. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Julie.
Okay, could you read my lips? Sorry. Just that making sure that we all know where the resources are, make the acquaintances, work on the relationships, and forge those new relationships. So you're the best resource for those victims that you come into contact with. I think that's the best way. And doing things like this with our community partners is amazing. So thank you, AVDA, for everything, and Barbie for hosting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Julie. Alicia.
No, I think my hope is that I just am really in a space where I feel like we're starting to listen and hear each other more. And this has been, you know, we've been in a hard couple of years, hard doing this work. Many of you, I'm sure, have been doing this work for a very, very long time. And you know, and by coming together and really listening to one another and really hearing each other and working together, I'm really hopeful. I'm really hopeful about those communications. I get excited about it, and I think it then produces a lot of creative thinking. I think we have so many people that are just so experienced and have so much knowledge that they can bring to the table. And so even though it's been hard, you know, I don't think any of us can do this work if we're not just a little bit optimistic about what we're doing. And so I think that I'm really hopeful, and the work that we're doing right now, especially with the team, provides me a lot of hope, because I think it addresses a lot of needs for our clients, not only on a micro level, but definitely on a macro level.
Thank you, Alicia. And I'm going to ask Maisha, but before because I'm going to give you the last words, Maisha, I'm going to just say thank you to AVDA for all that you've done. Thank you to our panelists, Chad, Julie, Alicia, Maisha. Thank you, Marie, Nicole, for all that you've done. Marie, I know you've worked really hard to put this all together and keep us all in a row. So thank you for your organizational skills. My last word is, I'm going to give you a quote that we use at the Coordinating Council: "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much," by Helen Keller. That is so true. And each of you give me hope, and seeing survivors become safer gives me hope. Alicia, or Maisha, your last words from you.
I want to thank everybody for showing up for this call and this conversation. That's probably the most important thing that gives me hope, is that we have so many of you all that are working tirelessly to serve our community and to elevate this issue in a way that helps other people know that we need to work together, that we need to assist our client population in ways that ultimately bring about change and safety to them. I was on earlier getting ready this morning. It's Earth Day, so happy Earth Day to everybody. And there was an interview going on, and the interviewer asked one of the young ladies, about, I guess they have a blog, and she said that her dad, or one of the dads said, stop talking about, all of what's happening and the destruction of the earth. You're not going to get invited to any parties, or, you're not going to have a social life or something like that. And I kind of think about domestic violence in the same way, is, it shows up all the time and everywhere. And I know I probably go on and on about it, but if we don't continue to do this work and to keep talking about it, we will continue to have the huge problem in our society that we can intervene on and mitigate just by our efforts and just by our communicating about it with one another and then out to the community. So be encouraged, continue to do this work. Thank you for being partners. Thank you to the panelists for answering the call and coming alongside and talking to the audience this morning. Continue to do the work that you do. It makes such a difference. On behalf of the clients that we serve and that I've seen say thank you. I'm saying thank you because I know what you did made a difference for them. So have a good rest of the day. Happy Earth Day, and we'll see you, I'm sure, soon.
All right. Marie, do you want to put the link back up as people are checking out?
Yeah, Barbie, that's what I was doing. I was just trying to hang out to see if we.
Yeah.
Um,
So as if the panel's able to hang out for a few minutes, and Marie and AVDA folks want to hang on for a few minutes as people are checking out, then we can kind of wrap up.
Marie, did you get a maximum count of how many people actually got on the call?
At one point we had 97.
Okay, that's great.
And I'm just making sure I'm saving I think I saved the chat.
Okay.
Positive that I did.
Marie, someone asked if you could put the link to the survey on the chat.
Oh, sure. Well, you want to type that in? All right, I will, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you know it, I don't know it. I saw it on your screen, but I don't know it.
John created this, so kudos to him.
Yeah, you guys did a great job of putting everything together, and it seems like, just based on the comments, it was well received by the people who were on the call. And as I was saying, we probably could have gone on for a lot longer, especially as things started to people started to wake up and warm up. It's like, oh,
right.
I have a question. Yeah. Oh, I have a question. Yeah, that always happens, you know?
Agreed. Yeah.
Actually, if y'all don't mind, I do have a question. In Harris County or Fort Bend County, if you get a phone call for a domestic violence thing and the victim, for whatever reason, decides they don't want to press charges, will the county press charges anyway if they see evidence of something like that? Because I know in Travis County, a member of my family went through it where they didn't want to press charges, but they pressed charges anyway.
You want to take that, Chad?
Sure. It's evidence-based, and what that means is rather than put the victim, the survivor, in the position of controlling all that and then being controlled about it by the abuser, we make decisions about it. We welcome people who don't want to prosecute to drop off their affidavits of non-prosecution. They can have copies of it if they need to take it back to their abuser to show them that they've done what they have to do for them. And then if we have enough evidence, we pursue the case. We don't pursue it just for the sheer fact of he did it and we're going to get him for trying to tamper with the witness. We do it because if it's gotten to that level and we can prove it, there probably needs to be some additional intervention from law enforcement and from the criminal justice system to prevent this kind of thing from going on. Because if you give them the license to believe that they can abuse and then have the charges dropped by their own actions, things will get worse for your victim.
Yeah.
And it's the same in Harris County. I mean, that's where the Domestic Violence Division in the DA's office is basically was originally created to take in all of those so-called recanting victims. And the idea was the fact that, we know that often survivors don't want to move forward with charges, but at least if they could talk to an advocate at that time, that advocate can go through some of the reasons why they might be concerned and show some of those concerning factors and get them referred to services, and just let them know, hey, you may not want this, you're telling me it was all a lie or whatever. That's okay. I just want to make sure we all know somebody that's been in a bad situation. So here, let me give you these resources just to be helpful. And then again, if it's evidence-based, if there's enough evidence to move forward, they'll move forward. But, but it's the same thing with Harris County.
Thank you.
Julie, there was one more question. Do you see clients from all of Harris County or only Houston area?
So it depends. If this question is related to U visas specifically, that's going to be the victims of violent crimes that occurred in Houston or that were investigated by HPD. So I can't attest to the fact that Fort Bend County Sheriff's Department worked with the victim and they were cooperative. I can only attest to that in Houston. Now,
And Harris County does work on U visas. As a matter of fact,
yes.
and I had a whole back and forth. We were gonna work on a training with them, but they, Harris County will address it as well, for sure.
Yeah, so I have worked with John Klotka, who has taken our protocol for U visas and implemented that with the Sheriff's Department, most of that, so that we're on the same page. We did the same thing with Pasadena. And so we kind of have a network of U visa processing, and we try and keep it consistent. So the main thing, though, that goes across the board is it's got to be the investigative law enforcement agency for the U visa that's processing that affidavit. For everybody else, for crime victims compensation, that's a statewide thing. Even if you're not our victim, we'll still provide those resources and still educate you on all of that information and your rights as a crime victim, as far as that goes. So it's yes and no.
So I'm going to need to jump off. I need to prepare for our noon meeting, but let me know if there's anything you need from me. Thanks for inviting me. You all were so fantastic. I really agree with you, Maisha. I have tons of more questions I would love to ask.
Thanks, Barbie.
You're welcome.
Good to
Y'all
see
have a great day.
You too. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Bye,
Maisha.
everybody. Y'all take care.
Bye-bye.
Good to see y'all.
Bye. Let me go ahead.